Aston Martin is making bold moves in 2024, setting itself up as a potential powerhouse for the 2026 season. With Adrian Newey reportedly a deal done to join the team to work on the new regulations and the exclusive Honda partnership already in place, they might have a real shot at dominating the new era, similar to how Mercedes did from 2014. Fernando Alonso could extend his career if Aston Martin nails the new car design, but this might come at the expense of Lance Stroll. With Verstappen potentially eyeing a move to Aston Martin, Lance Stroll could face the tough decision of sidelining his son to bring in the reigning champion. While Lawrence has heavily invested in the team's future, there is a real possibility that Aston Martin could finally become championship contenders, but it might mean letting go of his long-standing dream of seeing Lance win races and compete for titles. Are we finally going to see Lance dropped from the team? For the past 2 seasons, Aston Martin has been gradually building itself up to become a serious contender. When they brought in Fernando Alonso, a former world champion, it was a clear signal that they're committed to making their mark and aren't just here to participate. They're here to compete at the highest level. They had a serious shot last season when they managed to give some pressure to Red Bull's dominance. However, as the season went by, they failed miserably with their upgrades and they went from being maybe the second fastest team along with Ferrari to being one of the worst teams at the end of the season. But over the past few months, Lance Stroll has been pouring resources into Aston Martin, setting the stage for the success he's been chasing. The team is shifting its focus now to 2025 with little room left to improve on the current car's performance. Stroll's not playing around anymore. He's brought in heavyweights like Enrico Cardile, Ferrari's former technical director, and Andy Cowell, who was Mercedes' power unit chief. His goal is clear. Aston Martin wants to start winning races and competing for championships by 2026. The same year, Honda becomes their exclusive engine supplier, a rare advantage few teams will have with the new regulations. This makes Aston Martin a tempting destination for a top-tier driver like Max Verstappen. Meanwhile, all eyes are on Adrian Newey, with Aston Martin close to confirming his arrival now, thanks to Fernando Alonso's influence and Newey's desire to work closer to home in the UK. Everything just fell into place. Newey will have a more hands-on role at Aston Martin compared to his more limited involvement at Red Bull, where he was focused on their hypercar project. According to BBC Sport, Adrian Newey is set to join Aston Martin on a long-term deal, reportedly a 5-year contract worth up to £30 million a year, including bonuses. The official announcement will come at a news conference at Aston Martin's Silverstone. Newey is celebrated as one of the greatest F1 designers ever, with a track record of 12 drivers' championships and 13 constructors' titles across his time with Williams, McLaren and Red Bull. His expertise is especially valued at the start of new regulations periods, and his move to Aston Martin is timed perfectly to impact their 2026 car design. Interviewers even had the chance to ask Lance Stroll directly about the possibility of Newey joining them, and Stroll said this: "Adrian and I have been talking not only for months but actually for years. Adrian is clearly the most talented and gifted individual in Formula 1 based on his track record and history, so I'd be very excited for Adrian to join our team, as I think every other team on the grid would feel exactly the same." What a lot of people don't realise is just how much has been poured into transforming Aston Martin into what it is today, and more importantly, what it's set to become in the coming years. The level of investment is huge, and that's where Lance Stroll's vision has really stood out. However, if he truly wants to see his team winning races and championships, he might have to face a tough reality. The face of Aston Martin's success might not be his son Lance, who he once believed would lead the team through these changes and become a future champion champion in the sport. It's also worth noting that Adrian Newey is the kind of guy who will want to work with the best drivers available. If he does sign with Aston Martin, you can bet he'll do everything possible to bring Verstappen over, especially if the Dutchman becomes unhappy at Red Bull by then. A pairing of Alonso and Verstappen is far stronger both on paper and in reality than Verstappen alongside Lance Stroll. Since Newey has no family ties to the Strolls, it's likely he'd push for the Alonso-Verstappen duo. Most of the other key figures at Aston Martin would probably back this idea as well, as having Alonso and Verstappen would give them better data and allow for a much more effective car development. In contrast, Stroll, known for his erratic driving under pressure, might struggle to keep up, especially with Verstappen in the mix. Fernando Alonso is probably close to retirement, and at this stage in his 40s, staying passionate will require a highly competitive car and a top-notch team of engineers. Aston Martin can provide that, but they're not just stopping there. They're aiming for the very best. Everything they've done so far has set the stage to bring in Max Verstappen at the first chance, likely in 2026. While 2025 might not bring any major changes for Verstappen or Aston Martin, that doesn't mean the grid will stay the same. Other teams have already made huge strides in catching up with Red Bull, and even before the new regulations hit, Red Bull could find it tough to stay on top. Verstappen, already frustrated with the development of the RB20, might see this as the perfect reason to make a move, further opening the door for Aston Martin. This likely wouldn't be a problem at Aston Martin, where Verstappen would reunite with several familiar faces, including Adrian Newey, Dan Fallows and Honda. Max has always spoken very highly of the Japanese manufacturer, crediting them with playing a crucial role in his first championship and the two that followed. The idea of racing with Honda again isn't something we should overlook, but it's not just the people that could draw Verstappen to Aston Martin. The team's state-of-the-art facilities are a big factor too. Their new wind tunnel, simulator and factory, all set to be operational by 2025, has put them in a prime position. Plus, with Newey managing to secure a deal that lets him skip the typical gardening leave in 2025, his influence on the next generation of cars will be huge, further adding to Aston Martin's appeal. But as you've probably figured out by now, fitting 3 drivers into 2 seats isn't very easy, and it's tough to picture who Lance Stroll would let go to make room for Verstappen. We've seen Ferrari make similar decisions without much hesitation when it comes to Sainz and Hamilton, but things get a bit more complicated at Aston Martin, of course, because of the Stroll family dynamic. On one hand, Lawrence has built this entire project around his son, so dropping Lance would be difficult. On the other hand, letting go of a competitive 2-time world champion like Alonso, who brings immense value and sponsorship, also isn't a great option either. This might force Lawrence into an awkward conversation with Lance about stepping down to another racing category. Given Lance's inconsistent performance, there are plenty of drivers who could push that car to its full potential and deliver stronger results than he has so far. We know Lawrence Stroll isn't afraid to make tough calls to keep his business thriving, but demoting his son from an F1 seat and admitting to the world that Lance isn't the driver he envisioned might be a step too far, something he may not be ready to face. However, this could be the only real chance for Newey to work with Verstappen, especially with the risk of Mercedes swooping in if Max decides to leave Red Bull. Even though Toto Wolff has expressed confidence in Russell and Antonelli from 2025 onwards, the possibility of Verstappen joining Mercedes is still very real. The reality is, if you don't have the best drivers on your team, they'll be racing against you. And as we've seen time and time again in 2024, a top-tier driver can make as much of a difference as a competitive car, if not more. It's actually baffling how Lawrence Stroll has gathered all the ingredients he needs for his success. His impressive moves to bring in top talents like Cal, Cardiel and Newey, along with investing heavily in Silverstone's facilities, show that success often comes with its own set of sacrifices. Right now, the only logical path for Aston Martin to start winning races and championships seems to involve making some tough decisions. Fernando Alonso is unlikely to walk away from the project, especially given the setbacks he's faced with the team. Of course, Lawrence could always replace Alonso with Verstappen, considering Alonso's age does make this a plausible move, but this could clash with what his partners and the engineers at Silverstone might prefer. With Newey on board, he'd surely want the very best drivers, and a pairing of Alonso and Verstappen would be pretty hard to beat. So do you think Lawrence will make the bold decision to replace his son with the three-time world champion? And if he does, will Aston Martin start winning championships sooner rather than later, starting in 2026? Share your thoughts in the comments below and check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.